राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदानन्दन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी न तेरा वन जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनातीरावनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी राधा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajakaacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajakaacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की, श्री वृंदावन धाम की, श्री मथुरा धाम की, श्री मायापुर धाम की, श्री जगन्नाथपुरी क्षेत्र धाम की, श्री गंगामय यमुनामय की, तुलसी देवी भक्ति देवी की, सामा वेदा भक्त वृंद की. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. So today we'll be reading from Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 10, verse 22. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Does anyone want to recite? Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, vedānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Mataji. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām sāma-vedosmi, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, indriyāṇāṁ manaś bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Vedānām of all the Vedas, sāma-vedaḥ, the Sāma Veda, asmi, I am, devānām of all the demigods, asmi, I am, vāsavaḥ, the heavenly king, indriyāṇāṁ of all the senses, manaḥ, the mind, also, asmi, I am, bhūtānām of all living entities, asmi, I am, cetanā, the living force. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Of the Vedas, I am the Sāma Veda. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. Of the senses, I am the mind, and in living beings, I am the living force, consciousness. Please repeat. Of the Vedas, I am the Sāma Veda. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. Of the senses, I am the mind, and in living beings, I am the living force, consciousness. Purport. The difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter. I'll read it again because it's so short and so powerful. The difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter. Om ajnānatimirandhasya jnānāñjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Yutupum. Sorry, 1 second. Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathantam Sangsajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahanarita Shri Vishakang Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. So thank you all for coming to today's Srimad Bhagavad-Gita class. I apologize for whatever I'm about to say. If it is not up to par, please forgive me. I am only speaking, I know nothing. I'm only speaking from what I've heard from Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, and other great Vaishnavas. So if I say something that does not suit you, please forgive me for that. And it's really hot in here. I'm not used to Vrindavan weather, so please forgive me for that as well. So today's verse is from the 10th chapter, and this chapter is called, in English it's called, Srila Prabhupada titled this chapter as Opulences of the Supreme. But the Sanskrit name for this chapter is Vibhuti Yoga. So Vibhuti, according to the Amara Kosha dictionary in Sanskrit, which is the most used dictionary in Sanskrit, it means exceptional opulence. So we all have some opulences, but our dear Krishna, he has most exceptional opulences, and that's the difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and us, Jiva Tattva. So in this chapter, Krishna is describing various vibhutis or opulences to Arjuna, and the reason why he's doing this is because he wants us to perceive him in almost everything. In Hinduism, for example, there's this pantheistic theory that there's many gods, anything can be God, God can be whatever you want it to be. So this whole thing of secular religion starts from this pantheistic theory where whatever one wants to worship, he can worship. Whatever one wants to call God, that can be God. So the advocates for Hinduism say that, oh, we're a very secular religion. You have no limitations. You can worship whomever, whatever, whenever you want. But the critics of Hinduism say that that's crazy. How can you worship anything and everything as God? I mean, we see in Vrindavan, like, it's not even a Govardhan Shila or it's not a Shaligram Shila. People just, on the stone, people put some red kumkum powder and a garland around it. And then next thing you know, people are standing on a queue to worship that stone. And it's not even something significant, it's just a stone. So this is what a pantheistic theory looks like. And the problem with that is that not everything is God. We cannot worship asbestos or the roof as God because because God says He's everywhere. No. God is everywhere, but in His impersonal form. But we have to worship God in His personal form. But how do we do that? We have to kind of understand that God is everywhere, but in a personal way. So that's why Krishna is describing all these vibhutis from verse 19 all the way up to verse 42 of the 10th chapter. And in these 23 verses or 22 verses, he's trying to make us feel His presence everywhere, because without us feeling His presence everywhere, how can we perceive God? Unless we can feel that God is everywhere in a personal way, how can we think of Him being there? Like, for example, whoever is in this room, I know you guys are here because I see you, because it's personal. But if you guys are sitting on the other side of the room, behind the wall, it's very difficult for me to know that you guys are there, unless someone tells me. Same way, Krishna is doing that. He's telling us that of the luminaries, I am the sun. Of the stars, I am the moon. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Like that, he's describing so many opulences of Him. And so, simply to make us realize that He's present everywhere, in every living entity, in every species, in every planet, in every element. Like he says, of the great bodies of water, I am the ocean. So even such a simple thing, water, without which we cannot live, that Krishna is somehow telling us that that's also Him. Like he says in the 7th chapter, Rasoham apsu kanteya. He's the taste in water. And of the bodies of water, He's the ocean. So he's describing so many opulences. So he starts describing all these opulences in the 20th chapter. And he starts by saying that Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutasya Stitaha, that I am present everywhere. So in every category, the best of every category, so all these opulences, what Krishna is trying to tell us is from all the categories of anything that you can imagine, He is the best of that category. For example, of all the animals, lion is considered to be the best animal. So Krishna says, of the animals, I am the lion. And then of the fish, He says that He's a shark. And then of the immovable mountains, there's so many mountains in the world. There's mountains in Africa, there's mountains in North America, South America, Europe, everywhere. But he doesn't mention any of those mountains. He simply says, of the immovable mountains, I'm the Himalayas. Mountain ranges, actually. So, it's to show us that Krishna is the supreme, not that he's some substandard, created or self-concocted God. No, he's the best of the best. He's the supreme. And vibhuti, like I said, means exceptional opulence. So to be exceptional, one has to be the best in that field. And that's exactly who Krishna is. He's the best in every field. And that's one more thing that he's trying to tell us. But let's go in a little more detail as to what exactly Krishna is trying to describe to us in these opulences. I'll just wait for that to finish. Happens all the time. So these are like the reasons that I just said are like the, so to say, the external reasons why Krishna is describing all these opulences. Now there's more deeper reasons and meanings as to why Krishna is describing these opulences. So when he says of, like in this verse he says, vedānām sāma-vedosmi, of the Vedas I am Sāma Veda. How are we supposed to imagine that? Like Sāma Veda, none of us have ever read the Sāma Veda. We don't know what the Vedas even look like. We only hear about the Vedas like, oh, there was the original Veda, the Atharva Veda, then it got split into 4, then those 4 got split into thousands and thousands of subparts. But it's very like, it's far away for us. But what Krishna does is that he's trying to, through describing himself as the greatest of each category, he's trying to tell us that we are not purified yet. Our senses are not purified. Like, there's a verse in the Bhakti-yoga Sindhu where Rupa Goswami says, Atashi Krishna namadi na bhavet grahyam indriyāṇāṁ. Unless our senses are purified, we will not be able to perceive Krishna in everything that we see around us. And that's the reason why we're not able to perceive Krishna in everything around us. It's because our senses are impurified. So Krishna, through these so many opulences, he's trying to remind us that, look, I am present everywhere, I am in everything, I'm the best of everything, but you cannot see me because you're not purified. But I'm telling you, I am this. So when you get purified one day, you will understand, you will see me more clearly and personally. It's because, the reason why we can't see him is because of this material contamination that we have. It's the soul, it's pure by nature, but because of coming down into this material world, we have been contaminated. There's dust all over the soul, and because of that, we're unable to perceive Krishna. But through these opulences, or through these descriptions of these various opulences, we can somewhat, even though we're not purified, we are still somewhat able to think of some way to connect to Krishna. Like water, it's a very material element. There's nothing special about water other than that it quenches our thirst. But once we realize that, oh, Krishna is the taste of water, oh, the ocean is Krishna, then we can see like mundane elements as something more spiritual. So Krishna is trying to make us understand that even matter can be spiritualized or can be seen from a spiritual vision. And once we are able to get to that spiritual vision, then we can use everything for Krishna consciousness. Because after all, that is the whole point of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not some, like Srila Prabhupada says, it's not an artificial imposition on the mind. It's not like we have to think, oh my God, Krishna, God, 2 hands, flute, gopas, gopis, so many things. No. All we have to do is just try to connect everything that we're doing in our daily lives in the service of Krishna. And then eventually, once we're purified, we'll be able to see everything automatically. So this is kind of like the stepping stone to get to that stage. And another thing that Krishna is indirectly trying to make us realize from these vibhutis of his is that this body, the conditioned living entity, is functioning on selfish self-interest. But the whole point of Krishna consciousness is to become selfless to others and serve others. So we should try to get to selfless service towards others instead of being selfishly self-interested in ourselves. And if we can slowly, by following the 4 regulative principles and chanting of 16 rounds, as Srila Prabhupada has said, we'll be able to get to understanding that God is great, but we can get to that next step of that and understand how great God is. Srila Prabhupada says, God is great, that everyone knows, even a fool knows that God is great. And Christians also, they say this, God is great, but no one knows how great God is, but devotees know how great God is, because they understand these vibhutis of Krishna at some point in their lives through devotional service. So that's the whole reason why Krishna is trying to describe these opulences. And you'll see, it's not that he's listing these opulences randomly. They're connected in a very nice way. And in this verse also, I'll show you the connection. I'll talk about it. So now that we know why Krishna is listing all these opulences, we can ask ourselves, but what is the qualification? Like, who is qualified? Not what is it, sorry. Who is qualified to see this? To see these opulences, to understand these opulences? In the 20th verse that I just recited earlier, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutas Shayastitaha. So Gudakesha, Krishna was reciting these opulences and describing them to Arjuna. Arjuna is, one of his names is Gudakesha. Guda means sleep, and Isha means one who's conquered sleep. So there's a pastime of Arjuna when he was a kid, when he was sent to his guru's Gurukul, to practice archery. There, he was a little boy, and he was eating rice or morsels of something at nighttime, and there was no light, it was complete darkness, and somehow he was able to put the food into his mouth without even looking at what the food was. So he started to wonder, if I can put the food into my mouth without any light, then I should be able to shoot arrows at my targets as well. So he started practicing in the darkness. Every night he used to practice with immovable targets, movable targets, invisible targets in the darkness. And this is how he conquered this inability of being able to shoot arrows in the dark. So this darkness is represented as, or sleep represents this darkness. So that's why Guda means sleep. So Arjuna conquered sleep. And sleep also represents ignorance. So Arjuna was able to conquer ignorance. So in the same way, when Krishna says, Aham Atma Gudakesha, he means to say, only one who has conquered ignorance can understand these opulences. Otherwise, even if one isn't purified, it doesn't matter. Even if the one is not purified, it doesn't matter that they can see Krishna everywhere. But unless one comes out of ignorance, they can't even think about these things. Thinking is one thing, and then seeing is one thing. But if one cannot even think about Krishna everywhere, then forget seeing. So one who is in ignorance cannot think of Krishna in these various opulences that he's mentioning. And this whole material conception of life is that we're in complete ignorance at all times. And only through devotional service are we able to come out of that darkness. And in this regard, Srila Prabhupada states a wonderful sentence in his Purports. For those who are sleeping in the darkness of ignorance, it is not possible to understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself in various ways in the material and spiritual worlds. So this being in the mode of ignorance, being lazy, sleeping too much, eating too much, or doing all sorts of abominable activities, that cannot help us think of Krishna. And if we cannot think of Krishna, then how can we ever think of or imagine seeing Krishna one day? So this is the qualification that Arjuna had. He was Gudakesha. He had conquered ignorance and sleep. So he was able to understand these vibhutis. And later on in the 11th chapter, Krishna showed him his Virat Rupa, where Arjuna could see the ocean, the lion, the mountains, everything on the universal form of Krishna. Because he was at that stage. He had conquered ignorance and he was purified at that point. So the next question we can ask is it possible to know all of the opulences of Krishna? In short, the answer is no. Because Lord Anantadev, an incarnation of Balaram, Lord Balaram, with his unlimited hoods and unlimited mouths, he's unable to glorify Lord Krishna properly. Because the problem is, every time he thinks he's finished glorifying Krishna, another opulence pops up. Krishna goes like, okay, let me describe this. By the time he describes the next opulence, another one comes up. So constantly Krishna's opulences and qualities are increasing, and it becomes impossible for Anantashesh, with his unlimited hoods, to describe them. So who are we? We are nothing. We can't even describe what we ate for breakfast yesterday. So how can we describe of Krishna's unlimited and unending qualities and opulences? But in the 19th verse of this chapter, when he starts describing the opulences, he says, what does he say? He says, pradhanyataha. Pradhanyataha means those which are most prominent. Yes, I will tell you of my splendorous manifestations, but only of those which are prominent, O Arjuna, for my opulence is limitless. So these, from the 20th verse up to the 42nd, these are the opulences that are the most prominent. Like in the same way Krishna has as many incarnations as there are waves in the ocean, same way there are as many opulences as there are waves in the ocean. And Krishna is limitless, and to understand him is impossible even for a pure devotee. But Krishna gives intelligence to each and every one of us according to our level of surrender. So to the degree that we surrender to Krishna by proper chanting, proper hearing, and proper association with devotees, to that degree Krishna will reveal himself to us. And this is a science. It's not some far out philosophical idea that Prabhupada has left behind for us. No, it's an actual fact. So only by Krishna's mercy can we get to know his opulences, and that mercy depends on the level of our dedication to spirituality. Like Prabhupada says, the most important thing in spiritual life is sincerity. So if you're very sincere, at some point Krishna will reveal himself to us. So this is the essence of this whole chapter. I just summarize it, so going forward it makes sense what we'll be reading for the next 20 verses. But let's discuss this verse that we chanted all together earlier. So vedānāṁ sāma-vedosmi, the first line. So he says that of all the Vedas I am Sāma Veda. Now why is he saying that he's a Sāma Veda? He could have said, because the original Veda was Atharva Veda. So why doesn't he say, oh, I'm the Atharva Veda? It's because the Atharva Veda, although it's the original Veda, it describes Krishna in a more indirect way. It talks about like planets and how their unfavorable positions will affect Krishna, your path to bhakti, your path to this, to path to Krishna. Like Krishna is mentioned as the son of Devaki there, but it doesn't give a direct approach. And same with the Yajurveda. It contains information on like who is the owner of all things in this world, and which demigod controls what planet, which demigod controls what element, all these things. But it doesn't really talk about Krishna directly. But the Sāma Veda, it's all about music and singing. It's approaching Krishna in a very personal way, and it's approaching him in a very tangible way. We all like to sing songs. In some way or the other, everyone is singing some sort of songs. Birds are chirping, they're doing kirtan. They just don't know they're doing kirtan, but they're doing kirtan for Krishna. They just don't know. So like that, everyone is singing something at all times. And Sāma Veda is all about this singing and how to approach God by singing. So basically the whole Veda, the Sāma Veda, is filled with rich songs that are sung by various demigods and how they're glorifying Krishna. And in the Sāma Veda, the most famous hymn is called the Brihat Sāma. And this is apparently a very melodious tune. I've never heard it. It's a very melodious tune, and it's sung only at midnight. So also all the sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, the 7 notes in all the ragas, whatever you call. I'm not a musician, so I don't know anything. So I think they're called ragas. They all come from the Sāma Veda. And we use sa re ga ma pa da ni sa for kirtan, to play the harmonium, to play so many instruments. That's what the boys in the Kirtan Mandali are doing 24 hours a day. They're using information from the Sāma Veda. And the Sāma Veda also has 2 divisions called the Brihat and the Ratnarata. And these 2 divisions are on the 2 wings of Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu. So the right wing is, I think, yeah, the left wing is Brihat and the right wing is Ratnatara. And when Garuda flaps his wings, all these hymns of the Sāma Veda are heard by the pure devotees, like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, all these exalted devotees, Bali Maharaj. So Sāma Veda is meant for the pure devotees who understand the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and who know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's why Krishna says that he's a Sāma Veda. Also, right before Kali Yuga started, Srila Vyasadeva, he took the Atharva Veda and he divided it into 4 different Vedas. The Sāma Veda, he gave it to Jaimini, his disciple, and from there, Jaimini divided into 1,000 samhitas and divided into 1,000 of his disciples who further divided the Sāma Veda into so many other different subparts and sub-samhitas, so to say. So this is a little about the importance of Sāma Veda and why Krishna says that he's the Sāma Veda. And then in the next line he says, devānām asmi vāsavaḥ, Indra. So in this chapter, later on Krishna says that of monarchy is the representation of Krishna. So Indra, because he's the king of heaven, he's the representative of Krishna. And there are 33 million demigods. I don't know how many 33 million is in Indian counting system. I forgot. 33, 6 zeros, how many? 33 crores. There's 33 crores? Or 330? 3 crores. 33 crores, okay. 33 crores of demigods. And of all of them, Indra is the leader, the king. And all the demigods have residence somewhere in the heavenly planets, but Indra, he shares his residence on Mount Meru with Lord Brahma, Vayudev and Suryadev. And yeah, so these, on top of Mount Meru, they have their residence. And Indra's planet is full of opulences where there's so much sense gratification, so much enjoyment, but the other demigods, they don't have as much enjoyment as Indra does. Why? Because Indra is the king of all the demigods. The king always has a different level of enjoyment and different respect that he gets from his praja or his people or living entities who are under his rule. So he's a representative of Krishna. We can go on talking about Indra for hours, but he's not really the essence of this verse, so I'll move on to the next line. Indriyāṇāṁ manaś cāsmi. So the mind is the leader or the master of all the senses. That's why Krishna says that if one is able to control the mind, then he's able to control all the senses. And we've heard it time and time over and over again from Srila Prabhupada, from Bhagavatam, from Bhagavad-Gita, that the only way to control the mind in this age of Kali is to chant the holy names of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then in the 25th verse of this chapter, he says, Yagnāṇāṁ japa yagnosmi. Of all the sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy names. Imagine that. In this Bhagavad-Gita was spoken to Arjuna 5,000 years ago, before Kali Yuga started. But this is not the first time that the Bhagavad-Gita was spoken. It was spoken millions and millions of years ago to sun god. What was his name? Vivasvan. So Vivasvan he heard this Bhagavad-Gita from Krishna millions of years ago. In that also 10th chapter, 25th verse, Krishna said, Yagnāṇāṁ japa yagnosmi. Back then he said that of all the sacrifices, I am chanting of the holy names. So of all the methods, the 4 different methods of approaching God, like meditation, deity worship, sacrifices and chanting. Chanting of the holy names has always been the best way to approach God. Not in this yuga, not in the previous yuga, not in the one before that, in all the yugas. So when Srila Prabhupada says over and over again, simply chant Hare Krishna, everything will be fine. There's a reason behind it. why do you think Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago and started Sankirtan Yagna? He could have started doing sacrifices together. We could have just sat there and put ghee and butter into so many things and sat and done yagyas all day. But no, he decided to do Sankirtan Yagna because that's the easiest way to approach Krishna. Also, Sāma Veda is full of songs and music. And since he says that I have all the Vedas, I am Sāma Veda, you see the connection now between line 1 and 3? That's the connection. That yes, of the Vedas, I am Sāma Veda. And then he says that of the mind, of all the senses, I am the mind. But the mind can only be controlled through chanting. So that's how our dear Krishna is so intelligent, flawlessly intelligent, that he can just connect line 1 and 3 in such a deep and complex way. So I found this very, very interesting when I was going through what I can speak about this verse, because it's such a short verse and there's so little to say, but after contemplating on it, I somehow came across this. So thank you, Krishna, for the intelligence. And the last line, bhūtānām asmi cetanā. Of all the living entities, I am the living force. So in the 42nd verse of the 3rd chapter, towards the end, very, very end, he says, indriyāṇi paranyāhur indriyebhya param manaḥ manasastu parabuddhi yo buddhe paratastu saha. He says that dull matter, like a floor, is the lowest. Then above that is the senses. Then above the senses is the mind. And above the mind is the intelligence. And above the intelligence is the soul. He doesn't say it in the verse, but above the soul is the super soul. So what I'm trying to say is, you see how we're connecting again? The 4th line is connected to the 3rd line now, the mind again. So the 4th, where he says that of all the living entities, I am consciousness. Consciousness means the soul. So the soul is higher than the mind. So better than the 3rd line in this verse is the 4th line. And he's ending the verse in such a nice way by saying that consciousness is the best thing there is. And consciousness is another word for soul. So soul, like Prabhupada writes in the Purport, the difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness, like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter. Now, both consciousness and matter, they cannot be created by us. We can never create matter. We can never create consciousness. Forget consciousness. We can take matter, we can change it. Energy can be changed, it can be transformed, but it can never be created. The wall can be created, but earth, that's the main ingredient of this wall, that I cannot create, you cannot create. Like today, Bhadrinarayan Maharaj was saying in his class about tears. Prabhupada asked the scientists, so can you create tears? And the scientist said, no. Can you create a blade of grass? No. So all these things that we cannot create. But what's more important than us worrying about creating matter or changing matter is what is required to run the matter. Like, this microphone is useless. If no one is using it, if I'm not speaking into it, or if someone else is not speaking into it, it's just a microphone. It's just collecting dust. Same with the lights here. If there's no one in this room, what's the use of these lights? If no one is pressing the on switch, these lights will not work. The fan, it's cooling me down, but if Prabhu didn't press the on button, I'd be sweating right now. So all of these things around us are practically useless if there is no consciousness involved. And the consciousness, it doesn't mean that the soul has to go out of my body to turn on the fan. No, it can drive my body to turn on the fan. So that's what Krishna is saying in the last line, that of all living entities, not just human beings, of birds, rats, dogs, monkeys, it's the soul. It's the soul that's directing everything. It's directing action, inaction, sleep, hunger, thirst, everything. Because the soul is self-sufficient. It doesn't need food, it doesn't need water, it doesn't need air, it needs nothing. But the body needs all these things. But the body is just dead matter. It's dull matter. So the dull matter needs the active ingredient. It's like the key to start the car. Without the key, the car will not go anywhere. You can push it, but how long will you push it for? But if you have the key, you can start the car and drive it. So the same way, the soul or the consciousness is the key to matter in any sense, in any and all senses. So that's what Krishna is trying to say and he ends this verse in a very nice way. And Prabhupada also gives such a powerful purport. And we can see in the human body, when someone leaves their body, you can see that the body slowly becomes dry, it becomes pale, it becomes weak, then it becomes heavier because water retention happens, all those things. It's because the soul has left the body, it's because there's no consciousness in the body anymore. So this beautiful human body of ours, we decorate it in so many ways. We put nice clothes, nice kurtas, dhotis, saris, whatever, gopi skirts. There's so many other things that we put on. But we forget that if the soul wasn't in the body, all of these things that we put on just becomes useless. So nothing would grow on our body if the soul wasn't there. I was thinking about the other day, I was cutting my nails and I was looking at them and I was wondering, how did you get so big all of a sudden? I only cut you 2 weeks ago. And it's because of the soul. It's because the hair on my head is also growing because of the soul. If the soul left my body, hair wouldn't grow, nails wouldn't grow. But that's just my soul. Even if my soul is there, if the super soul isn't there, then this body is still useless. The body cannot function without the super soul. And Krishna starts describing all these opulences in the 20th verse by saying, Aham atma gudakesha sarva bhutashaya stitaha. I am the super soul, Arjuna, seated in the heart of all living entities. Now there's a reason why he starts with this particular description. He could have said, oh, I am the sun, I am the moon, I am this, I am that. No, he says I am the super soul. Super soul is the most important thing, ingredient, so to say, in existence of the human body or of the material world. There's different kinds of super soul. There's a super soul of the universe, of the whole material universe, which is Karanodakashayi Vishnu. Then there's the super soul of each particular universe, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And then there's Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who is the super soul of every living entity and every single atom. Everything is controlled by Kshirodakashayi Vishnu in this particular universe. All the incarnations of Krishna come into this world through Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Nrsimhadev, Lord Ram, Lord Ram as well. Varahadev, Vamandev, everyone, they all come to Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. And he's none different from the super soul sitting within my body, your body, her body, everyone's body. The body of a cow, monkeys, everything. So the essence of all these vibhutis actually is the super soul. It's not that Krishna is the Sāma Veda, that he represented by Indra. It's not that he's of all the senses, he's the mind, of the weapons, he's thunderbolt, of birds, he's Garuda, of so many things. Of the sages, he's Brihaspati, of the Devarshis, he's Narada. None of those matter. What matters is that the super soul, because even the pure devotees, how do they realize Krishna? Like, how do they talk to Krishna? How are they constantly in connection with Krishna? It's to super soul. So sometimes when we dream, when we're having bad dreams, our soul leaves the body and the subtle body leaves our body and goes around and does all their things. And at that time, many other living entities like ghosts and hobgoblins can enter our body and take over the soul and do another thing. But sometimes our soul also leaves our body, but because our super soul is still present in the body, nothing happens to the body. The body still continues and the soul can come back. But when the super soul leaves the body, then it's finished. It's done. So that's the importance of the super soul. And I think that's a very nice place to end this lecture. And thank you all for your attention and time. Hare Krishna. If anyone has any questions, I like to end things early, so 5 minutes if anyone wants to have any questions. Yes, Prabhu.
Same verse. Nice class, Prabhu. First time I am hearing your class.
It's my first time giving class in Vrindavan, so.
This same verse, when I give class in my hometown, for the college students, hometown near about my house, mostly the residential students standing, they came to Sundays, I give the class. When I read the last sentence, consciousness cannot be produced by the combination of matter, one of the medical students start to asking, test tube baby. Test tube baby made from, how come it is consciousness made from test tube baby?
So
That time I am not that
Right.
much, I have to answer for that level, student level.
but now you can answer them.
No,
Oh, so you want to know what a test tube baby is?
Yeah, it is.
So basically, test tube baby is not, it's not that the baby is created in a test tube. The sperm and the egg, they're collected from the mother and father and they're put into a test tube and they're shaken. Same thing that happens when you procreate, like the mixing of the sperm and the ovum and the secretion of all the enzymes and hormones and whatnot. Same thing, not inside the body, but in a test tube. That's what a test tube baby is called. So that's just, like I said, it's changing matter. You're not creating anything. You're just taking element A and element B, egg and sperm, and mixing them together. It's like mixing water and tea. Or bad example. Like water and sugar to make a lime, yeah. Like lemon and sugar to make nimbu pani. Like that. You're not creating the sugar, you're not creating the water. You're just taking water, taking sugar, and mixing them with some lemon, and you get nimbu pani. Same way, you're mixing egg from a father and mother and doing it. The reason why they do it is because either the father is impotent, the mother has fertility issues, or the father has been smoking too much, which has killed all his sperms. There's like maybe 1 or 2 sperms left. The woman is getting old. She's past 36, so that affects her ability to bear a child. So they have that in the test tube. The whole thing happens. The embryo, the secretion happens in the test tube, and then they put that into another woman, and then she carries the child for 9 months. So that's how it's done. But there's nothing created. It's just mixing of, changing or transformation of elements or energy, so to say. Nothing is being created. So the funny thing is, the scientists, when they come up with such challenges, they don't realize how the process works themselves. Whereas that's the difference with devotees and non-devotees. We understand both spiritual matters and material matters. So we can always win an argument with non-devotees. And Prabhupada says that a devotee will always defeat a non-devotee no matter what. So next time they ask you this stupid question, Prabhu, now you know what to say. Any other question? Yes. No one saw that. Nobody saw that.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. I really appreciate the class. I kept having all these questions that then you would answer. It was very nice that way. It was alive. I'm just wondering, with this whole part of the 10th chapter describing Krishna's opulences, we understand that Krishna was speaking on the battlefield for Arjuna, but also he was speaking for many, many other people as well, at different levels. So ultimately, who is the audience of this section? Who is the target audience? Because we see within, perhaps our own society, this aspect of the Gita is not emphasized. We practice sadhana bhakti. We perform devotional activities and hope that Krishna will reveal himself to us. We don't actively engage in the world looking at the Himalayas. So ultimately, who is the target audience?
So, you know how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the Bhagavad-Gita as like, well, I like to call it a cheesecake, but he describes it as a crest jewel box. So the first 6 chapters titled Karma Yoga. It's divided into Karma Yoga. That's like the lid of the box. And then the bottom 6 chapters, 13 to 18, is like the base or the covering of the jewel. Then chapter 7 to chapter 12 is the jewel. So that's called bhakti-yoga. Oh my God, it's called the bhakti-yoga. So these 6 chapters in the middle, 7 to 12, it's under bhakti-yoga. So 6th chapter ends with Krishna telling Arjuna that of yoginam api sarvesham, the best yogi is one who constantly thinks of me, all those things. Then Krishna says, okay, and I said all these things, but how will you meditate on me? What will you meditate on? Then he starts the 7th chapter by saying, Jnanante hamsa vijnanam. He starts all that description. Rasoham apsu kanteya, prabhasmi shashi sureyo. I am the sun, I am the taste of water, the son of the moon, the light of austerities, I am this, I'm the strength in man, all these things. Then he talks about who are these people who can approach me, who cannot. Then talks about demigods, how demigod worship is useless. Then the 8th chapter talks about how to think about all these things towards a time of death. Basically, that's the 8th chapter. The 9th chapter, again, he describes what he described in the 7th chapter, but more in detail. So when he describes all these things in the 9th chapter, which is the essence of the Bhagavad-Gita, then in the 10th chapter, Arjuna is asking him, you said all these things in the 9th chapter, but how do I see them? Like you said, you are present here, but you're not present. You're not present, but you're present. Verse 4 and 5 of the 9th chapter. Then Krishna says, okay, I will tell you that I'm present everywhere, 19th verse, I'm present everywhere, but I only tell you of what's the most prominent things. So that's why he's listing all these opulences. So Arjuna can perceive Krishna in everything. Arjuna is a pure devotee. He knows who Krishna is, he knows the opulence of Krishna, he knows Krishna as a water, he knows Krishna as a taste of water, he knows everything. But just for us, who down the line in the future will have difficulties understanding this, he's asking this question to Krishna, how do I perceive of these qualities you just mentioned in the 9th and 7th chapter? That's what Krishna is describing in the 10th chapter. That's why he's listing these opulences. But Arjuna still doesn't get it, or he still doesn't get it. Then he wants to see the universal form of Krishna. That's 11th chapter. You see how it's like progressing? Krishna says, I am this, 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 and this. Arjuna says, okay, but what? What exactly are you? How are you the taste of water? Like, give me more details. I want to know more about you. Then Krishna describes, okay, of the water bodies, I am the ocean. Of the mind, of the living entities, I am the consciousness. He's giving more precise details about himself. He's narrowing it down. And then Arjuna goes like, okay, I see, but can I see it now? Because Kali Yuga, everyone wants to see everything. Can you prove that God is existing? Show me, I want to see. You know, so many devotees back in the day, before they became devotees, they went to Prabhupada, show me God, can you show me God? In Vrindavan, people would ask him during lectures, can you show me God? Have you seen God, Prabhupada? Have you seen God? And Prabhupada would have to say something like, you can see God too, why are you questioning me? You chant Hare Krishna, you will see God. So Arjuna was asking these questions for us, because we were going to ask these questions now. So foreshadowing that, he asked these questions. Can I see your universal form? Does that make sense? And then Krishna shows him the universal form. Then Arjuna goes like, oh no, Baba, I'm sorry, I don't want to see it again. Please go back to your two-handed form. Then Krishna goes to four-handed form, then the two-handed form. Then Arjuna is satisfied, because that's bhakti-yoga. To see Krishna as the Tribhanga Shyam-sundar, the three-bended Shyam-sundar playing his flute, Murlidhar, like that. So that's what Krishna does from chapter 10 to chapter 11. Then in 12th chapter, he discussed devotional service very nicely. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. So perhaps I'm wondering, in Kali Yuga, especially Prabhupada, he describes like you can take the stairs or you can take the elevator. So is this method of seeing Krishna everywhere, is this sort of taking the stairs and we want to just take the elevator, or we should actually also engage?
Well, in this age, the elevator process is chanting. But sometimes, because we're impure, sometimes chanting becomes a little dry because of our lack of taste, because of lack of our own purity, lack of our own dedication. The process is pure, it's 100% efficient, but we are not qualified. So in that case, sometimes when we're chanting, we're like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh wow, what a beautiful water, oh, what a beautiful tree, what a beautiful bird. Oh wait, Krishna is Garuda. Oh, Garuda is the best of birds. Like that. So it's like, it's not the fastest way, it's not the slowest way. It's more like a additional extra thing that you can add on to supplement to chanting or meditation on the holy name. Not that you can do karma yoga with this or dhyana yoga with these things. You cannot sit there, like chapter 6, you cannot sit there on a elevated platform and think about, oh, Krishna is water, Krishna is water, Krishna is water. After 4 times saying that, you'll become bored. We're not Dhruva Maharaj. We cannot practice dhyana yoga for 6 months and then attain perfection. We have to practice it our whole life. And still, we may not attain perfection because of our offenses and our impurities. But the process is still pure. And this whole chapter is basically to enhance our chanting. It's like a japa supplement chapter, I call it in my head. Because sometimes when I'm chanting in the morning, I'm tired sometimes, it's like, Hare Krishna, and I fall asleep. But today I was reading this, because I had to give class, I was preparing a little bit, reading through the chapter. And today's chanting was very great, because it was raining all day, all morning, and I was like, wow, Dasoham Apsukonte, you really are tasty. Because one drop of Vrindavan water went into my mouth, and I was like, wow, this is tasty. Like that. It made my chanting a little bit more fun. And then I fell asleep. And then I had to chant my rounds after breakfast. So, okay, it's 7 o'clock. Hare Krishna. Grantra Srimad Bhagavad-Gita ki, Sāma Veda Bhakta Vrinda ki.